In a grand ballroom glowing with golden chandeliers. The air was thick with perfume, music, and laughter. The orchestra played a melody so elegant it seemed to float across the air like silk. Guests twirled on the marble floor, their gowns glittering with sequins, their shoes clicking in rhythm. Waiters carried trays of crystal glasses that chimed with every toast. The room was alive with conversations of power, politics, and wealth. To the world outside, this was a night of glamour and beauty. But in one corner, away from the lights and the laughter, sat a boy in a wheelchair. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hair carefully combed. But nothing could hide the sadness in his eyes. While others laughed, he remained silent. While others danced, he only watched. His small hands clutched the sides of his chair, not in comfort, but in quiet despair, as if those armrests were iron bars and he was locked in a cage. This boy was the son of a billionaire. A man admired for his wealth, feared for his power, and envied for his influence. The father believed money could buy anything: respect, love, even happiness. Tonight, he was in his element. Dressed in the sharpest tuxedo, surrounded by important guests who hung on his every word. He shook hands, made promises, raised his glass, and never once glanced toward his son. The boy, though surrounded by hundreds, felt invisible. Each laugh that echoed across the hall reminded him of what he could not have. Each twirl of a dancer's gown was a reminder of a joy forever out of reach. He wished, just once, that someone would see him. Not as the billionaire's son. Not as the boy bound to a chair. But simply as a child who longed to live. Among the dozens of servers rushing through the ballroom was a young black waitress. She was no stranger to hard work, balancing trays filled with champagne glasses, weaving between silk gowns and polished shoes. She moved with practiced grace. Her uniform was plain, her jewelry non-existent. But she carried something rarer than diamonds: compassion. As her eyes swept across the room, they landed on the boy. She noticed the longing in his gaze, the way his eyes clung to the dancers as though he wanted to memorize every step. She noticed how his lips curved faintly whenever the music swelled, only to fall again when no one came to him. Others may have overlooked him, but she could not. Something inside her heart ached. She hesitated. She was only a waitress. She had no right to interrupt such an event. No permission to cross the invisible lines between the powerful and the forgotten. But kindness does not ask for permission. Setting her tray down, she took a slow breath, smoothed her apron, and walked toward the boy. He looked up, startled. No guest had approached him all evening. She knelt beside him, lowering herself to his level, her smile soft and genuine. "Would you like to dance?" she asked quietly, holding out her hand. For a moment, the boy froze. He had grown used to being overlooked, to being pitied but never included. Why would anyone, let alone a stranger, want to dance with him? His heart pounded with doubt. But her hand remained steady, her eyes filled with gentle encouragement. Slowly, hesitantly, he placed his small hand into hers. Together they moved to the dance floor. The music continued, but the crowd began to whisper. A waitress dancing with the host's disabled son. Some frowned, shaking their heads in disapproval. Others simply watched in silence. Unsure what to make of it, the boy lifted his arms, imitating the dancers he had admired all evening. And the waitress followed his lead. She twirled beside his chair, moved in rhythm to his small gestures, and smiled as though he were the finest dancer in the room. The boy laughed, a sound so pure and free it silenced the whispers. For the first time, he was not watching life from the corner. He was part of it. Then, the billionaire father turned. At first, his expression hardened. His son, on the dance floor, placed in the spotlight. Anger burned in his chest. How dare a waitress use his son as a spectacle? But then, something made him pause. He looked closely. He saw his boy, not the frail, quiet child he always pitied, but a boy glowing with joy. His laughter rang louder than the orchestra. His eyes shone brighter than the chandeliers. In that moment, the father realized something devastating: all his wealth, all his power, all his pride had never given his son this kind of happiness. The father's chest tightened. For years, he had thought money was enough, that if he provided luxury, respect, and status, he was being a good father. But tonight, he saw the truth: what his son needed. Most could never be bought. The applause began softly. There are a few claps here, a few there. Then louder, until the ballroom echoed with cheers. Not for the wealth on display, but for the courage of a boy and the kindness of a stranger. The billionaire stepped forward, his polished shoes heavy on the marble floor. The crowd fell silent as he approached. When he reached his son, he placed a trembling hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy looked up, and for the first time in years, the father saw his child's face lit up with joy. Tears blurred his vision. He turned to the waitress. Her heart pounded. She expected scolding, dismissal, maybe even humiliation. But instead, the billionaire nodded. His eyes, once filled with pride, now brimmed with gratitude. That moment changed everything. The father's empire no longer revolved around luxury and power. From that night forward, he used his wealth to build schools for children with disabilities, to fund hospitals, to create opportunities for those societies had ignored. He poured his fortune not into monuments of pride but into lives that needed light. But he never forgot the person who had opened his eyes. A young black waitress, unseen by many, who had chosen compassion over silence. And as for the boy, he carried that night in his heart forever. It was the night he was no longer invisible. The night he danced. The night he finally belonged. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness does not just change one life. It changes two. It changes a family. And sometimes, it changes the world. Together, they moved to the dance floor. The music continued, but the crowd began to whisper. A waitress, dancing with the host's disabled son. Some frowned, shaking their heads in disapproval. Others simply watched in silence, unsure what to make of it.